Okay, everyone, this is Rangadad, not financial advice. This is just the way I'm looking at the market. And at this point, market's looking surprisingly okay. Just looking at the daily chart here on Bitcoin, obviously we're going to have some resistance around that 106 mark, which we've already had. But at this stage, like, momentum's crossed pretty squarely to the upside. If we close, I think even when it was down around 104, even a close around there is probably going to see momentum tick to the upside. BBWP, I think, is just starting to increase slightly. Yeah, slightly. It hasn't got above that signal line, but it's increasing off a pretty low base. What we don't want to see is a down day as that thing pops up, because the down day will probably rip quite hard. At this stage, though, the setups for the 5-day looks like confirming. Like, realistically, closure in 4 hours. Pretty sure that closure's got to be very low for this not to confirm. And this has 100% strike rate through the history of Bitcoin. Again, 100% strike rate over not that many iterations doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen every time, but the momentum seems to be there, surprisingly. There is a couple of things that I'll point out today which go against that a little bit, which could throw a spanner in the works, but for the time being, longer time frames are pointing towards further upside. Even like a 2-day close above these previous candles would be pretty handy. It'd be nice if we got a 2-day close above these ones, which would be about 106, 100. Anything above that, then I would suggest continuation is quite likely. So yeah, daily's looking pretty good. We've got a lot of resistance up around the 110 mark if we get there. But the key thing is let's clear that 106, 100. But unless there's a major turnaround, someone just drains the liquidity out of Bitcoin, then I would suggest that that's almost a given at the moment. Something would have to go pretty wrong. Just go to Bitcoin. So a lot of the alts and stuff are pulling back at the moment with Bitcoin. Shorter time frames, there was that pretty good trend line through there that once we broke that to the downside, obviously it just fell like a stone. So makes sense for it to provide some resistance on the way up. But you've got a fair bit of support down here. Like, we could come back into this vector candle from yesterday around that FOMC event. That could get us back to 101,500. I would expect that to be an intraday move. So it would happen during the day. We could get a red day and still, as long as we're confirming that 5-day setup, that red day somewhere within those 5 days, or even a 5-day period where it's red, it's still going, like, it's not going to kill that setup. So I'm still expecting a bit of chop here. There is a lot of overhead resistance. Failing the 100K level now will be a big deal. There is another trend line there which is basically this parallel channel. That could come into play. I would suggest if we're getting down into those levels that things are going to look a lot worse from there. But at this stage, we've got a fair bit of support. Sorry, just zoom in on this, see if I can get a decent level off here. Come on. That's not going to be the level I want, but sorry. Just bear with me. Anyway, there is potentially a channel forming there as well. Potentially move it up there like that, just because that on a big drop like that, never really worried too much about the stuff that goes past, as long as you're sort of reconfirming the level beyond it. Anyway, so these are sort of key levels on the way. If we do a retrace, and yeah, at this stage, I'd be surprised if we do come back down into this vector. Anything's possible. Market's on edge at the moment, but realistically, we're holding some pretty decent momentum. And shorter time frames, like, yeah, the overall, the cumulative volume delta, which we'll have a look at in a second, is ticking up as well, particularly on spot. It's going to be hard to pull back unless that drops back significantly as well. But at the moment, I would suggest there's more momentum to the upside than the downside. All right. Let's have a look at the longs. So longs have actually started pulling back a little bit. So there is a bit of profit taking going on this little pump. Not a lot though. Yeah, we're not seeing any big red candles. They're the ones that really suggest that there's significant profit taking happening. Let's have a look at the pivots. So we're sitting above this pivot here at 104,400 as well. That's actually interesting because I was going to suggest that 104 is a fairly key level for today. Cyclic RSI is getting overextended on the 1 hour, but once this is up in the, like, this is considered a bullish control zone too for RSI. So realistically, as long as we don't slip below this and do something like that, like it's once you're breaking the bottom level here, you're likely to keep continuing to the downside. As long as we're not doing that, then Bitcoin's looking reasonably healthy. So what will potentially go towards is the bands being well above the mid line at 50. And as you can see, like, it can still stay high and we can still run up pretty significantly from that level. That's why this is considered more of a bullish control zone than a potential reversal zone. Yeah, that's suggesting we could just sort of go sideways and down a little bit here, retest this level 104. But realistically, I wouldn't be basing any movement off the 1 hour generally the trend of the 1 hour is up. What you're looking for is a higher high on Bitcoin and a lower high on cyclic RSI, which you'll probably get on the next pump. So it would suggest, we'll get a good run up, and then that will see a decent pullback. If we get a run up and it clears this trend line and we sort of retest that, then that could be a pretty major move as well. But I guess the only thing that concerns me about this here is that it is getting pretty overheated to the upside, and a bigger correction in it could actually lead to quite a big dip in Bitcoin. So I am still on the lookout for signs that, okay, no, this part of the bull run is done. But at the moment, the weight or the things I would pay more attention to is that continuation to the upside is more likely than not. Another reason for that, total crypto market cap is looking like confirming momentum to the upside as well. As we know in this area, like this can chop around a bit as well. So it's not 100% a done deal, but it's a good sign. The other good sign is stablecoins versus Bitcoin. So that's a retest of that trend line there, and it's rejected off it. So there's potentially going to be a bit of support, probably more. The key level is if we close below that support there, let's just move it up a little bit. If we close below that, then Bitcoin's basically going to confirm the next leg up. All right, but that rejection off that and the fact that it struggled to get through that suggests there is money flowing out of stables into Bitcoin or into crypto. And I would suggest majority of it is actually going into Bitcoin. ETH BTC longs, these guys are still long in ETH versus BTC, which is actually probably paying for them, for some of them at the moment. Some of them went in pretty early, but that's actually a pretty good sign for ETH too. And if ETH is looking healthy, it's recovered the majority of this wick here, then it's hard to be bearish on the markets overall with that sort of setup. Now, Ethereum does have that key trend line on it there. There is another one. It's probably badly drawn. So it's sort of forming a bit of a you could actually look at this as a bull flag, gigantic bull flag on the daily. Yeah, look, at this stage, Ethereum looks like it should continue to the upside as well. And that's actually coming off bullish divergence on stochastic momentum. That's quite a bullish sign. So ETH may actually get some interest. And I would expect if the market's floating up, then 3,900 is almost a given. Beyond that, if Bitcoin's breaking new all-time highs again and smashing it to 120 plus, then yeah, okay. Ethereum's probably going to get up to at least that 5K. But I would suspect that there's other alts that are going to run harder too. CME 106,680. That will be a pretty decent close if we're closing somewhere around here or higher. Seems to be holding fairly well. But similar with the other ones, that's sort of obviously a pretty key trend line to break through. If we're doing that, trying that tomorrow, it's probably going to be at around 113. this is coming off a much higher stochastic momentum as well. So but there was a much better bullish divergence on momentum coming off this low here, off the 200 EMA on CME too. So, CME is looking pretty good. Hard to be bearish with a chart like that at this stage. ETH versus BTC is actually ticking up a bit. Bullish divergence on momentum. So look, ETH versus BTC longs are probably actually going to recover some of the losses they had earlier in the year. Okay, let's go NASDAQ. NASDAQ's had a positive day, much to a lot of people's disappointment, I think. This could be related to options. I think NASDAQ and S&P 500 are probably going to be sitting in this area for the next couple of days now. S&P 500. So GDP growth is lower than what was expected, and that's a fair drop over the previous. So quarter on quarter as well. So it would have been the final quarter. I'm not an expert on GDP, but I would suggest that is a good sign for people that want lower interest rates. Ryan Coin is now live. Yeah, okay. So yeah, that the market may actually like it because of that. Lower GDP growth means the Fed has a reason to actually cut rates to try and help support that. And when they're not worried about jobs numbers at the moment, apparently, and inflation is pretty reasonable. So what we want to see this tomorrow is, hang on, that's coming out Feb 1st. Oh, it's my time, don't I? So yeah, tomorrow in the US markets, we want to see good, at least the core PCE price index. If that comes in at or below forecast, I would actually suspect that that will be another catalyst, another reason that the Fed can use to cut interest rates. If that comes in above forecast, then that could actually be a trigger for a bit of a market downside move. And then next week, manufacturing PMI will be interesting. If that ticks above 50, it's going to suggest a reasonably strong market. Job openings. We want job openings to actually stay pretty flat, I think. Services PMI, yeah. Not huge news announcements next week. The earnings are going to be the big one that'll drive a lot of this. So S&P 500 is up pretty well today as well. Looks like it wants to close that gap before the end of the week. Momentum is sort of flat to down here. If we do get a break back above, then that will tick momentum back to the upside. So it's still technically in the bullish control zone, and volatility is still pretty high. So it's not looking like rolling over just yet. Equal weight Qs is actually momentum is ticking back to the upside at the moment. We are in a pretty critical zone here though, so we'll wait and see if it can continue to the upside. Again, it's hard to be bearish when you're seeing daily charts like this. Decent volume too. Equal weight S&P is actually breaking the previous high here. It's probably going to have some overhead resistance there. That trend line goes a fair way back. If we're breaking that trend line, then that's going to be fairly important, I would think. What's that trend line there? Yeah, okay. This is kind of playing out the way the way I suggested it needs to play out for the bulls to really go to new all-time highs. So yeah, breakout. The fact that we're well above the vector candles in here too, it does look like it wants to go a little bit higher. Momentum's still okay. I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but it's okay. This could be a area for a pullback on the S&P 500 minis though. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a great trend line actually. It's only a very short trend line comes through these bottoms here. I suspect that will be broken. Or it shouldn't find it hard to break that anyway. Just going to have a look at advanced decline line. So advanced decline line's picking up again as well. So breaking to new all-time highs is a good thing. That's what we want to see. If that had have failed and sort of crossed back below these EMAs without putting a new all-time high in, that's kind of one of the things we were worried about in here, because that typically leads to more downside. But for the time being, advanced decline line is supporting further rally. IWM, sorry. IWM's looking okay. Looks like it's sort of confirmed breakout of that level. Want to see a little bit more of a close above this level would be handy, but in general, that's a good sign. Futures is just above those closures at the moment, so IWM's looking reasonable. Look, this for the time being, this is going against the trend. People got pretty bearish over the last week. XLY, XLP, that's a pretty good move. It's trending back to the upside. So going to be watching this fairly closely still, but at this stage, no major breakdowns on that. The one that we do have a breakdown on, which is kind of one that concerns me a little bit more, is XLP, so Staples versus the SPY. Staples is getting a bid at the moment, like it's going quite well, which generally means people are shifting into the staples that tend to not drop as much, and they're stronger through economic downturns. So this little breakout here, it's not really confirmed yet. If we get back above the 1336 level, back above this candle here, and potentially even closure above this, should be a resistance line, that's when I'd get a little bit more bearish on everything. But at the moment, this is not a positive sign for markets, I wouldn't say. Equal weight, XLY, XLP is trending back to the upside. That's suggesting more upside to come. And the equal weight staples versus S&P 500 is not breaking through the trend line there. So, you know, it's trending to the upside, but we've still got a fair way to go before we actually break that trend line. So no, I wouldn't say there's any major reason to be super worried at the moment. Regional banking is still playing around with this trend line. reasonable closure today. It is just recovering this vector candle here, but generally if the market is floating up, then it should go with it. Another rejection of this trend line, and you would think it's probably going to fall away, but which won't be a great thing. Home construction's bounced a little today again, so looks like it's actually consolidating before a breakout of these moving averages. So a consolidation below key levels isn't a bad thing. Typically, it's just gaining momentum or gaining power before it pushes through. So hopefully that's the case. That could be a distribution, but at this stage, it's looking more like a break to the upside, which would suggest more bullishness on the markets. Momentum is coming down, but yeah, we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Semis got a little bit of an uptick today. Semis got a big gap to fill there. I suspect it'll do it. It's mostly recovered these vector candles here. Gold, DJI versus gold's coming back a little bit. No real concerns about that one at the moment. Momentum is coming to the downside though. DJT versus gold. Okay, so this is one where if DJT breaks down below this, then I'd be suggesting the market's going to have a decent pullback. Yeah, breaking key levels is not great. See this here, like it was toying with it around here on the S&P 500. Global liquidity was still reasonably up and flat, but then once we broke down below that little low the second time, that was basically the top before a decent pullback on the markets. So yeah, just be aware of that. For the time being, it could potentially move quite significantly to the upside, but off low BBWP as well. Not that I would pay too much attention to BBWP and stuff with this, but yeah. So there is some things that are suggesting that we are getting close to the end of cycle. I mean, DJT making a high above here is actually a reasonably positive sign. If it just pulls back and sort of retests this key level here, 16,220 is going to be a pretty key level on DJT, I would suspect. If we can bounce off that, then I think happy days. The S&P 500 markets in general should go up. DJI looks like it's about to break new all-time highs. The VIX is coming down still. That's a good sign. The skew actually dropped pretty hard yesterday. So the fact that markets have been pretty flat to up, well, not really even flat. They did have a pullback midday, but they've been generally up. So it's a little concerning here. Typically just put the line on. Typically a big flush in the skew like this would normally suggest a bigger pullback is going to happen, especially when price hasn't really done it yet. That's probably the most significant bear signal that I've got. Would pay most attention to. But at the same time, the the one-day volatility, one-day options volatility is still pulling back, and typically when that's pulling back, your upside is more likely in the short term. What you don't want this to do is hit this trend line and bounce to the upside. That will basically, the markets will pull back from there. So yeah, that skew read is quite significant. Something to be wary of. Like at this point, it's not a time where you can expect to hold positions for a long time. If you're bullish, you'd be taking profits on the way up and having relatively tight stop losses, I think. DAX is still going. Holy shit. That dumbfounds me. This doesn't come back till next week, so Monday. Wow, UK market going nuts as well. Wow. I guess that was the retest of the breakout. Okay, that's price discovery mode, I think. Where's UK market going to stop? It's probably, I'm going to call it from there to there. It's probably going towards 88.20-ish, which could be a day away based on that move, but wow. Another more, I guess, hopium type target would actually be somewhere, like assuming this is essentially a big bull flag, that would see it at 9,700. Let's see what that move looks like. Where are we? About a 15% move. That's funny. The reason that's funny is we were looking at basically the S&P 500 doing the same sort of thing by potentially April. Where did I have that? On one of these charts. There we go. Just based on a similar setup to this move here after that dip, from the bottom to the top, 88 days, 15%. So that would bring us into 11th of April. Yeah, if the UK 100 is going to do it, then why not for the S&P? I mean, it looks nuts there, but like that looks like a really fast sort of run. See if that plays out. Yeah. Interesting. Probably a more realistic target on that is actually this one. So that was a channel breakout. You're probably looking at a little over half that move, so 8 or 9%, 91.64. Okay, that's generally a bullish sign. Japanese market, you kind of expect to follow suit, but it doesn't have to. TLT's going okay. Yeah, nothing to really write home about. Bonds, high yield junk is still grinding to the upside. I think it's going to have some resistance soon, though, potentially within the next day. But in general, the bonds market isn't showing any signs of concern, really. Like even this indicator here is just going sideways. It's consolidating above moving averages, which isn't great, but at this stage, looking fairly positive. That trend line's a pretty significant one. So yeah, oops. At this stage, the bulls seem to be in control of the market. 2-year, 10 years still looks okay. So the 2-year looks like it's confirmed the breakdown from that trend line. Target on the 2-year is somewhere around 3.8% as a general move. Like it's going to happen somewhere around on that sort of trajectory, I would think. So out into March, end of March, if that's happening, then the market going to 15% up in that low into the same sort of time frame would make sense. 10 years looks like it wants to break down from there as well. So we never really got the bounce off the trend line that we thought might happen yesterday. So breakdown, sort of retest and break to the downside wouldn't be unheard of. Chinese market close. Yeah. Dixie, yeah, it's pretty well. Looks like it's retested and confirmed that breakdown as well. Dixie's likely to keep going to the downside. Aussie dollar's in a pretty good spot for a bounce, not from momentum perspective, but just from the amount of trading going on from that level. Pretty substantial. Euro US dollars going pretty well. Sort of confirms that breakout really. And even if you move that into that level there, which picks up the top of this peak, that's not a bad level for a breakout. You sort of got the first test, the breakout, the retest, and then move to the upside. That's not, I wouldn't consider this read fantastic at the moment just because the Chinese 10-year isn't trading yet. So don't worry too much about this. But yeah, we hope next week this starts back to the upside. Tesla is kind of crazy because its earnings were pretty shit and it just like it dropped and then Musk came out and convinced everyone that everything's okay and you know robots and stuff are cool. So Nvidia's still struggling. I think this is accumulation at the moment. There have been some pretty big dark pools in this area on Nvidia. And Microsoft was down, then up, then down, and finished down and pretty well hammered. Like this, I suspect, is all related to the DeepSeek AI story as well. But that's significant momentum to the downside as well. So Microsoft could actually get beaten down here, which funny thing is tech stocks are struggling. That's a pretty key trend line for Microsoft to hold. Suspect it's gonna, yeah. Microsoft needs to hold this, and it's had some buying off that level. Momentum's not in its favor, but you know, momentum can turn pretty quickly on these sort of markets. Just look at that. Same thing there. So yeah, Microsoft's a bit of a coin flip. It's left a massive gap though. Just have a look at this on the 15-minute. Like, big drop to the same sort of level. Bounced. It did actually look like it was going to do something similar to Tesla and close up positive, if not flat. And then, yeah, bigger sell-off after hours again. And then, yeah, pre-market, same thing. Sold off, generally sold off, but it is looking like it's finding a base here. Pretty decent buying volume at the start of the day. So Microsoft could be on discount at the moment. You'd kind of expect that if the rest of the market's going to float up as well. And realistically, once everyone settles down about this DeepSeek AI stuff, they should tick back to the upside because earnings were pretty good, really. Back to the daily. So Apple's looks like it's recovering this key level here, and that was confirmed as a key level. So a breakthrough level, back up, break away from it, just confirms that as a key level, and you've got multiple touches on it through here as well. So Apple's actually looking relatively bullish. Earnings are after the close today. That's a little concerning. If Apple disappoints big time, then you would expect it to come down at least to 229. But to the upside, you've got plenty of room to move. So 248, even into 250 is potential upside on Apple. I'd be a little bit concerned with it at that point. You'd want to see over the next week that it actually breaks through that level. Otherwise, it probably will come back down and retest that 230-ish. So earnings are pretty critical for Apple, and it's going to sort of set the tone for the rest of the market as well, these big guys when they're reporting. So Amazon next week hasn't really gotten back up to that trend line yet. A little bit of pullback on Amazon into this area and then bounce on earnings is a potential play. Meta having a bit of a relax after a big earnings result. That's a pretty significant surprise on the actual earnings per share. So obviously these guys knew something we didn't. Typically a run up like that into earnings doesn't lead to higher prices normally. It'll just be interesting now to see if people will take profit on this move, potentially bring it back into this trend line for a bounce away from that. But Meta had the better day out of the big guys for earnings wise. Semis are mostly holding or doing a little bit better. Yeah, not a bad day on semis. It looks like they're wanting to recover a bit. Even Stellantis is actually potentially breaking a trend line, which would suggest that the market thinks the buyers are actually still out there for cars. Ford's holding a pretty key level as well. Overall, oh shit, Aussie market, new all-time high. I mentioned to a work colleague yesterday that the Aussie needs to break this all-time high to make me more bullish on the market, and that's a pretty significant break of that high. So in general, the overall sentiment is pullback should be met with buying demand. Like, I'd be surprised if this is a blow off top here. It just doesn't look like that would be the case. All right, so in general, yeah, I think this is a good point for a turnaround. Like even Sol has recovered this vector candle here, and pretty decent move to the upside, like daily bullish engulfing candle at the moment, assuming we don't pull right back. But it's not to say we won't get little pullback. So intraday pullback into 234 for Sol, I think should be a pretty decent buying zone. Okay. XRP, again, that looks like a pretty decent break of that trend line. There is a lower time frame, decent trend line in there. That's a break and a retest of it. Move to the upside. Very hard to be bearish on these markets at the moment. Again, I'm not going back into spot positions with a lot of the alts that I was in. I've just got it in Bybit, and I'm just using 10 to 20x leverage and just going to be taking short-term positions as I see them. Just the risk is too high with the global markets the way they are at the moment. But yeah, should be a good February based on what we're seeing here at this point in time. Big move on hype. That's a big daily close on that if we're closing above this wick here. 27,050. We're 40 cents above that at the moment. That's suggesting to me that hype should probably get up into the 40s. So probably look for a decent pullback on hype and take a position on that. SUI USDT. Yeah, SUI's looking like, I mean, it needs to probably have a rest to break through the 200 and the 50, but particularly the 200, that's probably a more critical level for SUI. Has been support and resistance in the past. So, but yeah, look, again, low leverage, expect decent drawdowns on a position, and probably average into a position if it does keep going against you. Looks like the play at the moment. If you're expecting Bitcoin to break out and markets to go up, then we should break through this 200. Of course, if we don't, I guess the breakdown of that would be SUI closing below $3.50 and confirming below that. So shorter time frames, sort of break below, retest, and break away again. That would be quite bearish for SUI. I would expect SUI to come back into $2.27, but SUI is getting a lot of interest at the moment. I'm hearing a lot about it. They're coming out with their own game console, all sorts of stuff. Like they're really positioning themselves fairly well with big investors at the moment, and ex-Facebook guys. They got a lot of contacts, and I'm expecting SUI to probably go on one of the bigger runs from here out of the major L1s. And then yeah, AI is probably going to be the big thing as well. AI 16Z. It's been beaten down pretty hard over the last couple of weeks. So turnaround on AI 16Z would be pretty substantial. Supra's getting a good buy as well. So a lot of the movement on the alts are suggesting that, yeah, the market does want to go higher. Good move on Lingo. ETH. Yeah, a lot of these are bouncing off pretty decent levels. So we just need to see continuation of that momentum on Bitcoin, I do believe. Yeah. All right. That's just looking at the charts. I haven't really covered any of this, but for pullbacks, 104 is a key level. I mentioned that before. If we sort of drag below that in any significant way, then you're actually looking at a retest around the 100K mark. That won't, like intraday, that would be okay, but geez, you'd want to see a pretty decent bounce off that. That would sort of be invalidation in my eyes if we're breaking below 100K and actually continuation below that. That would be the reversal of my bullish stance. Liquidity wise, on the 1 day, there's actually more bulls in there. So, pull back into that 104, even high 103s is okay. You'd probably want to see it bounce from there rather than try and take all this down to 102,500. 102,500 has been a key level the whole way along, though. So, yeah, you'd expect a bounce from there. 7 day, still mainly bullish. 30-day, still mainly bullish liquidity. So be nice to see a bit more short liquidity come through, but there is a fair bit above. And we can leave this here for months if we have to before we come back to it. I'm not trying to just be super bullish here either. It's just that's the reality of it. The other reality is that a lot of this bearishness in here has been met with significant upside still. There is the CVD on the spot is trending back to the upside generally. Be nice if it did move a little bit higher than that, but if we're sort of pulling back on Bitcoin into that 104, potentially 102,500, which would pick up the middle of this big vector candle that was in here. Moves into that. Looks like Bitcoin's having a pretty decent sell-off at the moment. That would sort of, what you want to see basically is CVD on spot to actually hold these lows. If that happens and we start to bounce again and CVD starts to tick up, then I'd be a lot more comfortable with that as a good base. But there was a lot of like pretty decent volume through this area here. So 102, 102, 500 is a pretty key level if we pull back that far. At the moment, 104 is the 20 moving average on the daily as well. So it's kind of, I think that's what it was anyway. Don't quote me on that yet. No, sorry. 102, 900 is the 20 moving average on the daily. So yeah, look, intraday, we could have a pullback into these levels, and the 50 EMA is in 101, 800 at the moment. So, I wouldn't put it past it to come into those levels and retest, but I wouldn't expect it to stay there very long. If it does look like staying there for a long time, then I'd get a little bit more worried. So we do have this other trend line through here as well, which hopefully would provide support. But I think these two trend lines are going to be key supports, along with sort of the moving averages in here, 104. So that's the 1 hour 50. The 1 hour 200 is at 103, 200. So there's plenty of support below. That's what I'm leaning towards. Just go back to this. Funding rates, if we see them drop negative again and start to actually move back up, if we see funding rates break from negative back into positive, that's going to be a pretty good sign. Like that was a pretty good buying point there, and it has typically been a pretty good buying point from memory. Even, oh no, that was a shit buying point there. Never went negative, but Yeah, typically when it's happening at the lows, it's not a bad level. Looks like it's coming down pretty hard at the moment, so lots of people taking shorts. So yeah, that liquidation level there down to 104. Still plenty of liquidity down to 102 and a half, 102. Yeah. Keep an eye out for those levels. Could be decent buying opportunities if you see a turnaround. There are a lot of shorts coming into the chart above here as well. So there is plenty of, I guess, orders to come into if it does want to push up from there. But we're looking at the biggest gap here sort of happens below about 102, 600. So yeah, I think I'd be surprised if we go much lower than 102 in this pullback. 104 is almost an inevitability from here. But yeah, I'd be looking for bounces around there. Decent trade at the high here on Coinbase, future 2x longs. Technology still sort of going sideways at the moment, but decent buying on the lows here, and we haven't really dropped off further. So I suspect technology will go okay. Consumer discretionary still eking to the upside as well, which is not a bearish thing on markets. But yeah, XLP, not seeing anything major come through here. We'll have to have a look at it after the close, see if there's any big trades coming through. But these guys here are pretty good at taking profit, aren't they? Yeah, these look like buys. So we're not seeing any massive sells here, then consumer staples is probably still going to get some upside, which again isn't great for overall signs of market bullishness, but could just be that everything's going to go up as well. Marathon, not seeing anything major here, but there is some selling going on by the look of these, and it could be accumulation, but typically it's not the case. The other concern for me is Coinbase itself is getting some pretty big numbers coming through at the peaks here. So IBIT as well. This is the monthly chart. A lot of interest up around here, but some decent buys off these lows as well. And we haven't pulled back off this big one here. So not a bad sign there. If we just go to the 7 days on this, yeah, nothing huge coming through today yet. So typically some of these could be take profits, but it looks like it's still accumulation of interest at the moment, given what price action is doing. If I see a big sell come through this afternoon, US time, then we may see a bit more pullback over the weekend, more of an extended pullback, but I'm honestly not really expecting that. A pullback intraday today and then a decent buy at the open Friday US time would probably see us break to new highs over the weekend. Not saying that's a given, but the other thing is smart money's actually started coming back into the market yesterday. Obviously, it seems like they didn't get the dip that they wanted, but that's a good sign. Like, they don't always get it right here, but like just here, they were quite low while the market was grinding up. I would actually say the fact that smart money has started to come back in, even though we haven't really dipped very far, is pretty good sign for markets in general. All right, so even on this pullback here, we're still, stochastic momentum is still pretty well postured to the upside there. Just like to see a bounce off that 104 level. See what happens there. All right. If we do reject off here, then I actually, like, this confirms a big downside day for whatever reason. Yeah, there's some support around the high 90s, but I don't know. Downside targets after that would probably be in around that 86. At this stage, though, I'm still leaning more bullish than not, and pretty good trend line on the stochastic momentum there as well. All right, it's been another long one. Sorry, guys. I'll catch you later.